She-Hulk, attorney at law. It's obnoxious. We open up in She-Hulk's lawyer's office, where she's failing at basic morality. She asks, what's the responsibility of those with power? Do they merely have an obligation to refrain from the misuse of that power? Or do they have a duty to protect those without it? It's implied that they do. This is worrying, as it seems clear that the writers have sketchy ideas on the concept of ethics. At least they got the first part right. Yes, ethical people with power have an obligation to refrain from misuse of that power. A strong person with ethics, for example, should refrain from using their strength to rob and beat random strangers. Do those with power have a duty to protect those without it? No, that's far too simplistic. Take a bank robber who's stealing from a bank using a fake gun. The police are called and a SWAT team arrives. A person with power that is watching has no obligation to help the bank robber against the police just because the bank robber's not in a position of power. A lack of power by itself does not show that someone is virtuous, correct, or worthy of help. I can already tell that this is going to be a hard watch. This raises an interesting point though that the writers didn't even touch on. If a person has power, is inaction a morally neutral act? Or is inaction when a person has the power to help itself an immoral act? Hang on to that thought, we'll be back to it later. She says, those with the most power have the most to answer for. No. Being in a position of power or influence by itself is morally neutral. What defines a person as moral or not is what they do with what influence they have. In this case, coming from Disney, this is world-class levels of projection. She-Hulk's presentation is being critiqued by another lawyer who tries to give some admittedly not great advice, which is ignored anyway, begging the question of why She-Hulk is giving a presentation in front of this man in the first place, if she wasn't going to listen to his advice. There's no in-universe reason for him to be there. He's just a straw man for her to fight against. We cut to Hulk and his cousin Jen in a car with her driving. They talk about Cheetos, they talk about Captain America's virginity, and on occasions when driving she accidentally finds herself looking at the road. On one occasion she does, she's startled by a spacecraft and crashes the car, resulting in her being exposed to Hulk's blood in a version of her origin story more mangled than the wrecked car, and she runs off, now She-Hulk, into the woods. She finds herself confused and worse for wear at a bar, and goes to the bathroom to clean up. As she's cleaning herself, some women come into the bathroom. They see a woman in a bathroom looking a little beaten up, and their mind immediately goes to, a woman is hurt. This must have been done by a man. This was written by somebody that frankly seems to dislike men. Confusingly, they put makeup on her, a fur coat and heels, and leave her outside of the bar. As you do. 3 men approach her outside the bar and are quite rude and bothersome. She responds by turning into the Hulk, and they all shriek and cower like a stereotype of a young woman from a 1950s horror movie as she becomes violent. The symbolism here is hard to ignore. The contempt for men is pretty obvious. The writer treats forcing men to act like a stereotypical woman to be a humiliation, delivered by a woman exhibiting a version of the worst aspects of male violence. A psychologist could likely get a research paper out of this. She's tackled from off camera by the Hulk, or the man would likely be hurt or dead. Jen wakes up in her bed. She goes downstairs to find Hulk in a laboratory. He's been working to try and help her. After he explains her situation, she asks, "So I turn into the Hulk now too?" He replies, "I've been analysing your blood, and I was able to use your blood to completely heal my arm." She asks, "Oh, because I'm better than you?" He says, "It's basically different." She replies, "In a better way?" He says, "In conclusion, my arm is healed, and now I'm able to be my fully integrated self again." She says, "Smug Hulk?" He replies, "Smart Hulk." She says, "It's pretty smug to call yourself smart." Now, he wasn't even being smug. He used his scientific knowledge to heal himself and try and help you, and the first thing you declare is that you're better than him. Because your blood is better and he is the smug one. This is going to be a hard watch. The writer seems to lack any capacity for self-examination. Bruce tries to explain to her what being a Hulk means, and she rejects his advice constantly. "Here's the thing, Bruce," she says. "I'm great at controlling my anger. I do it all the time. When I'm catcalled in the street, when incompetent men explain my own area of expertise to me." And she says this as she tries to explain anger to the Hulk. After 10 minutes of her explaining what the Hulk should be to him after he's been living it for 15 years, I'm really not sure I can take this writing. The levels of projection are off the charts. Is this supposed to be feminism, or a parody of feminism, or are the two essentially indistinguishable at this point? She carries on by saying, "If I show anger, I'll get called emotional, or difficult, or might just get murdered." But she is emotional, she is difficult, and she may want to look at the rates that men get murdered versus the rates of women. She carries on, saying, "I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you. I do it pretty much every day," she says. This is just insufferable. She has no idea what he's gone through, but she's smugly certain that she's gone through more than he has on the basis of nothing but her own prejudice. So all of this just feels like projecting a lot of shit onto me, she says, as she wildly projects. I'm really not sure I can take watching this show. She decides that she doesn't want his help anymore and tries to leave. He thinks she's putting herself and others in danger and tries to stop her. A fight breaks out after she runs into him with a jeep, showing just how well she handles her emotions. We're 26 minutes into a new Marvel superhero show, and it's a fight sequence between Hulk and She-Hulk. And if the Hulk kills She-Hulk, I think I'd be genuinely happy. I already hate this selfish idiot of a character. She has the power to help a lot of people, but selfishly only thinks of herself, and what it will do to her life. Can I get a Hulk show instead, please? After they demolish his bar, he finally relents and lets her leave. "I'm a much better lawyer than I am a Hulk," she says. He replies, "Now who's being smug?" That was one of the few times in the entire show that she wasn't being smug. I'm starting to think that the writer doesn't know what smug means. She gets back to her lawyer's office and declares, "There's been no more Hulk stuff since. So I was right and Bruce was wrong." So she's already back to being smug. And then a female supervillain turns up in court, demolishes a courtroom, and She-Hulk has to fight her, proving She-Hulk wrong. I'm not even sure what I'm watching here. I'm not sure if this show's attempting to be feminist and is written by a moron, or if it's one of the most brutal repudiations of feminism I've ever seen, written by a diabolical genius. So, what's the takeaway from She-Hulk Attorney at Law? No, not this time, Immortan Joe. I did not have fun with this one at all. It was painful. In fact,
that was diabolical.